Hello, Algebra 1. So for 1.6, we were talking about distributive property. Over on the left, it says, recall, if you have something on the outside of the parentheses like A times B gives you AB, and A times C is AC, and there's addition because there's addition in the parentheses. Or A times B is AB again, and then if it's a negative sign or subtraction next to the C, then it's going to be minus AC. So I have a lot of examples to go through, but hopefully it won't take too long. Here we go. Let's start with number 1. So for number 1, let me zoom in. We're going to take whatever is on the outside of the parentheses, so in our case, the 7, and I'm going to distribute it. So what I mean by that is I'm going to take 7, and I'm going to multiply it by the x, and I'm going to multiply it also by the 4. So 7 times a variable is just 7x, and then a 7 times a positive 4 gives you positive 28. Okay. Moving right along to number 2. Again, 2 is on the outside of the parentheses, so I'm going to distribute that, which means multiply. 2 times b is 2b, and 2 times a negative 3, because this subtraction sign belongs to that negative 3, you get negative 6. Okay. Number 3, now we have a negative number on the outside of the distributive property. Oops, I apologize. Which is fine. Same thing. Take the negative 4 times y, which gives you negative 4y, and negative 4 times 3, which gives you negative 12. So just make sure you're watching your signs. Number 5 is kind of a trickster. There is no number out here that you can see, but there is a negative sign. So if there is a negative sign on the outside, let me zoom in so I can write. Think of it like this. This also equals negative 1 y minus 9. So if there is just a parenthesis or just a negative sign outside the parentheses, it's really telling you there's a negative 1 out there that you need to distribute. So negative 1 times y in this case is the negative 1y, or a negative y, and a negative 1 times a negative 9 turns into a positive 9. So make sure you're watching what's outside the parentheses. There may not always be a number, but if there's a negative sign, you need to distribute in a negative 1. Looking at number 8, this one looks backwards. We're still going to solve it the exact same way. Take your 8 times your 4 to give you 32. And then your variable in this case is just going to be in the back. 8 times negative b is a negative 8b. Alright, we're going to move to number 10. We have just variables now within our parentheses, but it's still the exact same thing. 3, distribute that in to m. 3 times m is 3m. And 3 times n is just plus 3n. Okay, sliding over to 12. We have now a variable on the outside of the parentheses. Same thing. D times c gives you dc, and d times negative 4 is a negative 4d. Not so bad. Going to number 13. Now we have a b, and a c, also with coefficients. So we're going to take what's on the outside of the parentheses and multiply it. There is no coefficient on the b, so it's still going to stay 6. And these a's and b's are different variables, so they're just going to sit next to each other and become 6ab. Same thing when you go to the to c. Now you are going to multiply the two numbers. You have a positive 2, so your answer is going to be positive. 6 times 2 is 12. And a times c is ac. Number 14 has now 3 terms in the parentheses, so you're just going to multiply the 2 3 times by each. So 2 times x, 2x. 2 times negative y, negative 2y. And lastly, 2 times 8 is a positive 16. Where these get tricky is where we see fractions down here underneath. So I'm going to do my best to explain this while showing my works. Let me shift over here. All right, so we're going to distribute this fraction. If it's 1/4 times 8, you can cross cancel. You can put a 1 underneath. 4 goes on itself 1 time, and it goes into 8 twice. And to multiply fractions, you just go across. So you multiply the numerators and you multiply the denominators. So for the numerator, you have 1 times 2, which is 2. And 1 times 1 in the denominators equals 1, so I'm not even going to write it. Then you're also going to do the same thing and cross cancel with the 4. Put a 1 underneath it. 4 goes on itself 1 time, and it goes in itself here 1 time. 1 times 1 is 1, and it had a negative sign, so it's just 2x minus 1. If you're not understanding this cross cancel, let me know tomorrow and I can help you. Okay, 17, this is where I'm going to need some work, some space to show this. Okay, so for 17, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to cross cancel, and if you need extra assistance, like I said, ask me tomorrow. All right, so we're going to distribute our fractions. I'm going to cross cancel. So what I mean by that is this 3 and this 6 have a 3 in common, so I'm going to divide each by 3. So if I divide the 3 by 3, you get 1. If I divide the 6 by 3, I get 2. Oops. So let me zoom out here. So really, my fraction over here is 1/2 times 1/5. And remember, to multiply fractions, you just go across. So 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 5 is 10. So this over here is going to become 1/10 x. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the fraction again. It's 1/6 times 18. If it's 18 as a whole number, you're going to put a 1 underneath it. Cross cancel. 6 goes into itself 1 time. It goes into 18 3 times. And you're going to solve across. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 1 is 1, which equals 3. So this is going to give you a plus 3. So I distributed this by cross canceling and this. Again, if 16 and 17 you need more work, go ahead and try 18 and then I can help you out tomorrow. Alright, the bottom portion is combining yesterday and today's, where we combine like terms and we're going to distribute. So I plan on doing 19 to 23, as long as I don't get cut off by the iPad. So here we go. 19, distribute first. We have to get rid of these parentheses before we can combine like terms. So that's where my starting point is. We're going to multiply, get 16x, subtract 24, and you're going to bring down this negative 6x. From there, combine your like terms, which should be your variables. 16 minus 6 is 10. And the constant of negative 24 doesn't have anything to combine with, so it's going to be minus 24. Like the example at the top, we need to distribute this negative sign. If there is no number there and it's just a negative, you're distributing in a negative 1. So this is going to read negative y, and this negative times negative 6 turns positive. And I'm going to bring everything else down. Combine like terms. Negative y minus y is a negative 2y. 10 plus 6 is a positive 16. 23 is going to be a real treat. So let's go ahead and focus on 23. All right, we're going to distribute, combine like terms, and you'll see something awesome happen with this one. Okay, so we can cross cancel, and to show that a little bit better, I'm going to rewrite the fraction over here. All right, so 9/4 times 10/3. We're going to cross cancel. So 3 goes into itself once, and it goes into the 9 3 times. 4 can be divided by 2, which is 2, and 10 can be divided by 2, which is 5. Go across, you'll get 15 over 2. All right, next up. 9/4 times a whole number of negative 4. Put a 1 underneath it. Now we're going to cross cancel. 9 and 1 cannot be simplified anymore, but the two 4s that are diagonal from one another can both be divided by themselves. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Negative 4 divided by 4 is a negative 1. Go across, you get negative 9 over 1, which is negative 9. So this is going to, oops, grab my x. This is going to turn into negative 9. Keep going with these fractions. Now we have negative 1/4 times 2x. That's my negative sign. Times 2. Put a 1 underneath. 1s can't cancel out anymore, but 2 can go into itself once and can go into 4 twice. Go across, you'll get negative 1 over 2. So that turns into negative half. X. Lastly, negative 1 over 4x times, oops, it's not letting me do the times, times negative 8. 4 goes in itself once, goes into the 8 twice. Negative 1 times a negative 2 is a positive 2. All right, combine your like terms. Woo. Fractions, when you subtract, you need common denominators, which we have. They both have the common denominator of 2, so I'm just going to subtract my numerators. 15 minus 1 is 14 over 2x. We have negative 9 plus 2, which is minus 7. And of course, we're not done yet with this one. We know that we can reduce 14 over 2 because that is 7x, and then you bring down the negative 7. So I know today was a little bit more difficult. If you guys want to try this one right here, 24, and send me emails, or I can help you on Monday, we will start class off with working on something like 20, 22, and 24.